Oh, thank you. I guess I was speaking of life, so let me restart a little bit. So, public systems don't just exist in the background, and they literally run your life. They decide how you move through cities, access healthcare, and also receive support. Um, One of the important thing about public systems is they practically dictate all the life experiences that are almost life defining, right? So here is one question we wanted to bring to you today. That is, are we redesigning public systems for the future or teaching people to survive the existing systems that was designed for the past? Because right now, technology is exponentially accelerating, and expectations are changing every day. And so many public systems, even now, like work through structures or policies or even models of decision making that are designed for a different era or a world together. Now, if you've ever wondered whether better services are enough or whether we need to rethink the entire operating system, then this conversation is for you. And especially if you work in government or public policy, service design, or you're just, someone who's curious about how the public services work, then you should definitely join this particular conversation that we are having today. Because the next era of public sector design might require more than just being better at designing services. We might actually go into questioning the policies, the power structure, the assumptions, and the operating system that is lying underneath all of it. That being said, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of SDN Community Voices, our weekly touchpoint with the global service design community. I'm Sudeshna Mehta, Foresight Strategist, Ecosystem Builder, and SDN Ambassador, and a member of the SDGC comms team. And not to forget, your favorite host for the Community Voices show. So thank you so much for joining us. Now, before we get started, can I ask you all to write in the chat where you're joining in from, and if public systems were having an operating system, what would be the one thing or the one new feature that you would install today? So let's get that started. And as you're typing in your answers for today, let's share a little bit more about the episode. Now, today's episode is the fourth SDGC special that we have, and it's called The Public Sector's Next Operating System. We don't just have one guest today. We have 6 incredible leaders of the public sector from around the world who are driving the change. And today's global roundtable of these SDGC community partners are really working across the entire public sector ecosystem. We have folks from the Canadian government and the city service design, public sector and policy from US and Netherlands, so they're more into consulting. And then we have founders of a US-based service design and governance community of practice. They don't just have one perspective, but they're bringing together a lot of different perspectives from different parts of public sector change. And all these collision of perspectives is what we are here to today as we challenge all these assumptions that are there underneath. Now, not without any further delay, let's bring on stage our incredible guests, SDGC community partners. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. Welcome. Thank
Hello.
you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
How are you joining? We are joining from 3 different time zones, so it's incredible that we could coordinate a time and just get this started. Amazing. So to kick us off, I would love for you to introduce yourself a little, but with a bit of a twist. So tell us about yourself and your journey, but from a perspective of the problems and challenges you're trying to solve or have already solved. Who can I throw the ball to first? I see Tim smiling. Tim, can you?
Yes, let me give it a go.
My name is Tim Schuurman. I'm a senior facilitator from our Amsterdam team. And we do basically a lot of stuff for different regions. So I was also in touch with different governance systems, from European to Eastern European to Middle East to Dutch. And it started long ago, actually in around 2011, 2012, when we were in a European subsidized project to help public services, especially in the railroad area, to integrate service design and human-centered design elements, and to get people to understand how it would help them in defining the service. From then on, I have been in touch with the Rotterdam municipality, also in the Mayor Challenge, helping the Rotterdam municipality use design thinking as a way of working on innovation, helping them with helping initiate social entrepreneurship going. And within the Eastern European countries, in Serbia, and they are looking for more frameworks. So they maybe lag a little bit behind. So they're looking really for new frameworks to do things in a different way. And then, of course, you have the Middle East, and they are, in a sense, maybe a little bit more advanced in the UAE, in the sense that there is very clear directions of where to go. And we help them going there. So that's a little bit of my background.
Oh, I think you're on mute, but I can jump in. My name is John Buckley. I'm the practice director of Public Policy Lab Midwest. My journey started off actually when I was very young. I became very interested in the bus system in my town, and started advocating for all sorts of improvements in that. And then as I became an older teenager, but before the age of 18, I found that I really wanted to do things, that I really wanted opportunities for festivals and stuff. But any concerts and things were always over 18. So then I started advocating for that kind of thing, and I think that started being the start of my interest in working with government, and getting that off the ground. I transitioned into design through business process improvement in a few other directions, and while working with an agency in Dublin, we ended up, it was a digital design agency, but I ended up kind of steering us a little bit more towards working with the United Nations migration body, the IOM, and that was not digital. And then we also worked with the Irish government. And as that moment was happening, I discovered the strategic design and came to Parsons in New York for that program, and already connected with the executive director and founding director of the Public Policy Lab, Chelsea Malden. And so my kind of journey back into working with government felt very natural. And here, I've been with Public Policy Lab since 2019, but for most of that time based in New York City, and eventually becoming the design strategy director for the organization, as we grew from a very small team to up to over 30 people. And my role was really focusing on helping our project teams that work with government agencies to improve public services for low-income and marginalized populations using a design philosophy. And so I would help scope those projects as they come in, and work with our teams to ensure we're meeting the project goals and that we're following really solid design strategies and approaches. More recently, I've transitioned to Chicago. And my role now is to support local governments in this region, the Midwest region, to integrate human-centered design in their work, and essentially elevate the voices of underrepresented populations.
Nice.
That's incredible. Thank you, Joe, for sharing. And thank you, Tim, for sharing. My mic's a bit slow to come off mute. As you can see, like on our screen, people are joining this conversation from Rotterdam, US, and then we have a few folks from Netherlands, Chicago, Texas, also from Brazil. So that's a really global crowd that we have here. So who do we trade this to next? There are a lot of Canadian folks. I'm going to ask, Fuad, do you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much. Yeah, happy to be here. Fuad Jalili, I'm the Acting Executive Director for Forward Delivery and Modernization within the Government of Alberta. And so really our mission is to develop new services through kind of various lenses and approaches. Prior to this role, I was the Director of Service Design, where I had probably among the largest service design teams in government in the world, about 110 service designers or so at my peak. And so really focus on this idea of creating better citizen services through understanding of our users and our needs in our communities. We're in a very interesting space because our province is growing quite quickly. We've reached, over the 5 million mark from a provincial perspective. And this is a mixture of urban and rural communities, including Indigenous and a lot of immigrant communities as well. And so our services have to change to meet that demand. And I think what's really interesting is that as government services evolve, so do the skill sets of our people need to evolve, people that are designing these services. And for me, my background really comes from kind of like consulting and design and from innovation from that side of the house. And so to me, I see it as an all interconnected thread and system personally. So I think innovation, design, systemic work, it's kind of all related in a way, maybe cousins or something like this. And so I think there are many approaches and many views on how to make great communities and have strong impact within our communities. And I think that's what's great about having a diverse group like this.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Fuad. Elnaz, can I ask you to take it from there?
Sure. Hello, I'm Elnaz Al-Yassel. I lead the service design and CX team at the City of Vancouver here in Canada, and I also teach design thinking at university. But that's just where I'm standing now. There is a very longer journey that got me here. I started my career as an architect, and that's where I learned the consequence of the changes we make on paper into actually the lived experience of people. And I took that lessons from buildings into services later, more doing designing systems for people, working on social issues, and also using even design thinking to get funding for problems that don't necessarily have a clean answer. And since then, I've worked with different levels of public sector, like provincial, municipal, and other crown corporations. But with all of that, there have been 3 themes consistently in my career, and them being modernizing our services, redesigning them for people we might be leaving them behind, and also building the case for design to be in the room before decisions are being made.
Amazing. Thank you, Elnaz. Then I'm going to ask Victor and Alexis in that order to share a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Victor Udoiwa. I'm based in Washington, D.C. in the United States, and I'm the co-founder along with Alexis of the Service Designers in Government, which is it's a global group, but I'd say the majority of people are in North America, and the majority of that is within the United States, of service designers who work in the public sector, either directly or as a contractor. I'm also the founder of the Washington Participatory Design Center called Justice by Design. And I'm an engagement manager at Bloomworks, where we work with local and regional governments around the country to help improve their products and services for the public. My journey started, I think, as a graduate student, I received funding from the government to work with the government to help do some better designs for government employees. And from then I became a teacher. And I was actually a government employee as a teacher and instructional designer, working with students and helping to improve our educational systems. But at one point I got to the point in my life where I just felt like there were a lot of projects I was doing where if I had not done the project, it would not have mattered. And I wanted to do things that if I hadn't done it, people would feel the difference because the work was so good or helpful. And so eventually I transitioned into working in the government. I've worked across 5 different federal government agencies in the United States. And my focus has particularly been on helping governments move towards more participatory practices and relational practices.
I can go next. So I'm Alexis. As Victor mentioned, we co-lead the Service Design in Government Community of Practice. So we bring together folks twice a month to learn skills as service designers that can really help change how we deliver public services. Outside of that, during the day, I work as Director of Service Design at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is a federal agency in the US government. Today, I'm in my personal capacity. I've been in federal government for 6 years and joined, originally I studied engineering, but I wanted a way to work in complex systems, but use design for good. So government is really that space that you can work on really complex challenges and have impact at a really large scale. So my division is consumer response. We're responsible for delivering 2 main external services to the public. So one is about educating consumers on their finances. And then the second is the complaint process. So when consumers have issues with a financial product or service, they can come to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, and then their complaint will be routed to the company, and the company has 15 days to respond and hopefully resolve the issue. So our scale is massive. We get millions of complaints a year, and it's kind of grown exponentially. So my work is to improve how we deliver these services. So things like, how do we help consumers communicate with debt collectors? Or how do we address our back-end systems for employees to meet the needs of this exponentially growing service? And I've also worked on multi-year cross-agency projects, like the one to improve the experience for older adults as they improve retirement age. So my work is always cross-functional and human-centered.
That is amazing. Thank you so much, Alexis. Now that we've had everyone's background, it's such an honor to host you. Let me just start with that first. And second, we have been discussing in our podcast about portfolio careers. This screen, my folks, is the very definition of portfolio careers, where you have probably touched all different points of the public sector, like different touch points, and have experience from be it teaching, be it consulting, be it actually engaging and changing the systems altogether. So that's incredible. Yeah. So that being said, I'm going to move to our core question for today, which is the current if public sector with the current operating system, is it currently obsolete? And are we really redesigning public systems for the future, or teaching people to survive the existing systems that have been built for the past? I see smiles. Who wants to go first?
I can kick it off. I think that government kind of has to work in the now and think about the future. So as I mentioned, the CFPB gets millions of complaints a year. That means we're getting them every minute of every day, and we can't just turn this off. People need help. At the same time, I do think we need to think more about how our systems are adapting and how we meet the needs of the future. So that means that I'm trying to build a collective vision of what systems change looks like. And I think that's really like the challenge of how do we address the fires and immediate needs today while also building momentum towards that desirable future.
Absolutely. Agree with that point of view. Who wants to add next to it? John?
I think it's a tricky premise of a question, because you can kind of break this down in so many different ways. Government itself moves slowly, and that's by design. when you talk about public services, then those really do need to be responsive to what's happening in the moment. I don't think that they, I mean, and every country here is very different from one another as well. So we can I can speak a little bit to the Irish perspective, I can speak a little bit to the Americans perspective. These things happen to evolve quicker and be a little bit more responsive in an Irish context, which is partly because it's European, it's a very centralized government, partly because it's a small nation. They don't necessarily move as quickly in the States and be as responsive. And I think both of them that I'm familiar with, these two government systems, are both really stuck in the now, or at least in the past 5-10 years, maybe. Maybe they're lagging in either case, but really not really thinking too much about what it will need to be in the future. And I don't think that in the political discourse, and this really needs both political and service to kind of come together, but we don't have folks who are really thinking about how our economic models are changing rapidly and are likely to change in the next 10 years, and what that will really mean. I mean, we're already seeing what it means for our public services when more people are relying on them. People are coming out of college without the kind of clarity of a career in front of them. And we have an aging population. So we're going to see more and more reliance on public services, and probably a tighter percentage of people who are contributing to the tax base that will support that. And so I think that there's a need to rethink the model in some ways to ensure that it's got stability for future. And I don't see that being part of too many conversations.
Thank you for bringing that up. This is such important discourse, and you've brought in cultural context, and then you're also bringing the political and economic situations of a country that actually define what it means to build a public sector there. And yes, we have to talk about taxpayer dollars, but we'll come back to that later. Who wants to go next?
Well, I can go ahead and go next. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
No, go ahead. No worries.
I was just going to talk a little bit about that idea that John brought up. I think what's really interesting, at least from our perspective, I think when we look at societies and governments as systems, sometimes they're contracting, sometimes they're expanding, sometimes they're stable from a growth perspective, and that changes how we approach design for citizens. And, if I look at some of the things going on within Alberta or within Canada, we are very much like a destination, right? In a lot of ways from an immigration perspective. And so we are in this like growth mode where both the country at the, and locally, we're trying to get more people into the tax base, but it's coming with a lot of other expansionary challenges. And I think like that's going to be the real shift for us as government moves forward. Is we are vastly different than what our country was maybe even 30 or 40 years ago from a makeup perspective, both in size, culture, maybe shared values. There is something that people want to be when they want to be Canadian, but I think there's a lot more there. And I think when a location or a place becomes an area for expansion, I think it's treated differently than a place that's maybe more stable in and out or contracting. There are places in the world where people are emigrating from. And so I think that's an interesting point of view when we look at how we design government services.
Absolutely. The growth versus, are you a stable nation? Are you getting people from new places? And the demographics also of the place as you're growing into older population or younger. So that's really important to highlight. Tim?
Well, yes, I was also sort of contemplating. I've been doing work in very different cultures, and I want to stay out of what is good and what is bad. What you see is that, and I think, John, you mentioned that the characteristics of government is that they are, by what they do, they are slower than many other organizations. However, people get used to, all kinds of speeds of things developing. So I think it's very important for public services to to also really realize the urgency for very quick change that they need to adopt before they get sort of also maybe flooded by citizens and entrepreneurs and tourists. Everybody uses government services that have very easy ways to do very quick communications that these governments then have to deal with. So I think there's maybe, due to, of course, the current technology boost, there is, I think, more urgency than ever to maybe rethink the way you deal with that urgency. And then if you look at more sort of more directive cultures, you see that they develop a lot more speed in adopting these new technologies, but maybe sometimes forgetting the human aspect, to be very honest. Where other cultures, it is very difficult to get sort of clearer direction in that organization. Although I think also these organizations and these governments and these cultures need to think about how they can maybe create more also, choices for direction and then go for that direction. Because, models that are not fast will maybe in the end clutter government fully at some point. So I think there's a lot of urgency to rethink the way they make decisions.
Yeah. And thank you for highlighting decision-making process. That's been a very trending topic across all countries now that technology has evolved. You have cross-cultural communication, like you are communicating beyond borders. What does it mean to have hierarchy, like the hierarchical model versus the more flat hierarchies? I know there are a lot of upcoming models, but that is very important to discuss in this context. Lisa, can I throw the ball next to you?
I can just add something to what everyone have been discussing so far. With the public services, we need to recognize that they were created at some point to meet the needs of the society at that time. And our society changes, our technology is changing, and with that, the people's expectation is also changing. And sometimes the challenge is that we are responding by taking the service we already have, and we are putting it to a different channel. We are adding a digital interface, or maybe we are automating a couple of those steps. And then we put lots of energy to teach people how to use it. And to me, that can be a problem in itself, because when you're renovating a house, there's just so much you can do. But at some point, we need to see, do we really need to probably knock down some walls and change the layout? Does it make sense to invest any more money in that redesign? So it is more of taking a step back and asking, is this still the right service? Are we solving the same problem? Because otherwise we are spending more and more effort to teaching people how to live with the limitations that old systems have, instead of using that to build something which actually meets their needs.
Definitely. Thank you, Elnaz, for that. I think one of our audience just shared Sarah, and she talks about how citizen expectations are continuously evolving, especially with technology. Initially, we had to adapt to COVID with remote work and everything, and now we're again having to do a second round of adoption to AI. I think you can't see the entire code, but yes, to AI as the technology is evolving. So thank you so much for sharing that. Alexis?
I think I agree with what folks are saying on this. Yeah, I think it's like, how do you balance that of, we do have so much we have to address today, and then how do we build buy-in that we even need to think about the future? And I think that's what I always am working towards, is like getting that leadership buy-in too, that we need to think about the future, and think about, as you were saying, like how we rearrange the house. And I think that's hard work, but it involves a lot of momentum building.
Yeah, I think to just piggyback on that, one of the things is we talk about this operating system. This is the term of the day, I think. And, you know, we think that's a technology term generally, and there's a whole bunch of different technological systems that are underpinning public services, and oftentimes too many that are not talking to one another, but they are there. But I think really the foundations for a lot of public services are actually people, and the people who are moving those forward, the people who are responsible for making decisions, as Tim was getting to. And so this idea of the operating system, I think, is not necessarily just a technology question. I think it's also about the people who are moving that forward. And, you know, I think Lexi's point about getting buy-in, that's most of the work, I think, of the people on this call.
Yeah, definitely.
I would add I think usually I'm okay if a government or the operating system in the way that you're talking about, John, is not where it needs to be, is behind, is old, is obsolete, as you were saying. The question is it moving? Is it moving in the direction that it needs to move? Is it evolving? Is it changing? And I think in a lot of ways, sometimes we focus on change, even though change isn't the ultimate goal. Really, we're looking at, especially in the work that we do, where we're dealing with actual equity and equitable outcomes, we're looking at is the purpose of the system changing? Are the outcomes of the system changing? And I think there's a lot of cases where you have systems that change, and we have this victory, and we do this, and we accomplish this thing, and this law was passed, and this new service was launched. But fundamentally, as you're talking about the operating system, it's still operating. You know, you could see a good example would be some of our economic systems. We have in the US, we have some version of capitalism, and you'll see all these beautiful things that people will slap onto it. Oh, we capitalism or green capitalism, etc. Various versions that, regardless, have allowed capitalism to still survive in fundamentally its main shape, with a few tweaks on the outside, but still producing these kind of inequitable outcomes. And so even beyond thinking about the operating system, which for me, when I talk about the operating system of the government, fundamentally, I'm talking about the ideologies, the framing stories, the meta narratives that are going on inside, the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, that guide our actions and what we do. Fundamentally, it's, I think, our approaches that are old, that need updated. I can't imagine doing any type of public sector work without a systems approach, number one. But two, when I look across systems practice and systemic design, the vast majority focuses on designing under complexity or designing under emergence. But in reality, you have to understand how to design under contestation. I am in a country right now where it's not a question just of how do I improve this public service? It's should the government even be providing services? We have arguments about that. This isn't true in every country, but that is a fundamental question. What is the role of government? And so this is 2026. Last year, we had a lot of people who were in service design positions, a lot of people who were in customer experience positions who lost their jobs or are currently at the point or verge of losing their job because their work and the type of work they do was not deemed essential or even important or valuable. So there's a whole political component, as John was talking about, that comes into this work and skills that we need as service designers to pull from, or areas that we need to learn about beyond just design that affect public services, because we're even having more fundamental questions about even should the government be doing this, or why is the government doing this, or I only want the government to enforce my property rights and that's all. So there's a lot of things for us to learn as we do this work.
Thank you, Victor. Like, I am absolutely resonating with everything you guys are saying, and I think our audiences too, as they share a little bit about their experiences on digitalization and other things. So nº004 is saying that, hey, if you look at the government as the key agencies then what is it important for citizens to be well aware of these framing visions? And that is exactly, I think, what you were hinting at. There's this goal alignment that is needed at a broader scale level that all the organizations need to have. And of course, there was one question that I want to transition to, since this topic is leading up to there and I'm itching to ask this question, is what is one thing that we now as public sector service designer need to stop pretending about?
I can start on that.
Yes,
I do work with many other designers, and also I mentor and coach junior designers as well. Something that I hear a lot is how leadership or non-designers don't understand us as the design community in public sector. But I'm going to bring a different side into this, that they understand us, and they understand us fine. And when we are going up to them saying the service is not working, or this is a problem people are struggling with, they understand and they connect with it. But where we are probably losing them is we are not translating what we are saying into their language, because those leaders, they need to make decisions considering risk, money, and accountability, especially in public sector. And that's our responsibility. And we need to walk into the room and say, here is a problem. This is what it is costing for people. And this is what is costing the organization. And these are the options. And this is what it would cost us if we don't act on it. And I think that's how we can grant us as the design community to be more part of that decision making, rather than being brought up later on or alongside. And yeah, I think that's kind of also the top of mind for me now for a while, how we as designers translate the things that are concerned for us into the language, considering those money, risk, and accountability that the organization is responsible for.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Lance. I see.
As somebody who's just kind of stepped into more of an executive role in the last month or so, I think I just wanted to talk about what Elnaz was saying around also delivery pressures and speed. I think this is another thing that people are underestimating a little bit, about the tension between a fulsome design process or a fulsome human-centered design process and the realities and the constraints of the financial system, AI pressure to deliver services and to deliver things faster and cheaper. This is huge for us right now. And so I think there has to be a smarter balance about how we integrate how we integrate design and service design in ways that make it easy for other people to understand while moving at speed. And so we may not be able to do 6 months of research anymore, or 3 months of research, or it might be pretty simple research. It might look like it's in the form of usability or other areas. Co-creation and generation still need to happen, but I think the way we're delivering, especially within technology, has changed a lot. And so I think designers need to be okay with doing design work and have it not called service design or CX or UX or whatever you may want to call it, but still trying to find ways to cover user needs and design for citizens.
This is the age of fast prototyping and delivery. Who wants to add something to that? I'll also add like one point. I think Flo, you covered a lot of different aspects, but confidentiality is also another thing that public sector really needs to look into. Like when you're working with this amount of data and information that's personal information, there's constantly that angle of confidentiality of data that we need to, privacy and confidentiality that we need to look at. So policies is another thing that's guiding and slowing us down.
In our work in Public Policy Lab, we particularly focus on engaging underrepresented populations as we're looking at new services systems design, and hold that dearly. At the same time, I think it is very easy if that is the kind of the sole or the primary input to a project or a service design or systems design project, to kind of forget about, because really you're focusing on people who are in the now. And I think there needs to be more inputs and more consideration to what we're calling at PPL as the next administration. Wales, a number of years ago, created a commissioner for future generations, and that is a head of government level position that is with all the other commissioners, and their role is to review all policies and review services to ensure that they are sustainable and suitable for future generations, and they represent the voice of future generations. And I think that as I think service designers can, particularly junior service designers, can lean very heavily on what they're hearing from the communities, and they need to be able to translate that into something that can be less literal, and also something that can and make sure they're getting inputs that are really pointing them towards future systems and future states, to make sure that they are considering the needs of the unborn or of the very young who will be navigating the system in 20 years' time.
True. Thank you so much, Juan.
I'll add, building on that, I'll say two things. I think your question is about what should we stop pretending. So service designers and government should probably stop pretending that human-centered design is the gold standard. I think we're pretty knowledgeable about the problematic nature of it and things that have moved beyond. It definitely, I think, was an improvement beyond like a technology-based type of design that focuses on feasibility. But we know that there are things beyond that: community-centered, society-centered design, life-centered design. But even because we have a narrow understanding of what life means in the West, moving towards planet-centered design. So that's one I'll say, and I think that's really important for us to begin to bring that into government, which affects all kinds of things like AI, et cetera. But the second is, I want to call out Daisy Wu's comment in the chat. I think we need to stop pretending that we're so successful. Most of the work I've done in service design in government has, number one, been a failure, but number two, even when I think it's been successful, 10 years later, 5 years later, working on the same issue, the same problem, with no like appreciable difference in the level of this dynamic or difference. And so I think we pat ourselves on the back and compliment ourselves on things that I don't know, they're not really getting to the root of the problems that we're trying to solve, and they're still here for the next generation to address, because we really haven't, even though we celebrated really greatly.
Sure.
Go ahead. I would add to that too. I think it's like the nature of our work being very project based, and systems change takes decades, and you may not even see it in your career. And I think sometimes like we need to celebrate the successes, but systems change involves lots of people. And I also think that service design in government, we sometimes focus so much on the output that so much of the work is about changing mindsets and how we work rather than just the output. So I think we need to also focus on like, how do we build a more human-centered mindset in the staff that are delivering these services too.
Yeah, but basically with the idea that maybe everybody is a service designer, right? If you look at what you do, you provide a service to somebody else, and it can be outside of your organization, can be inside of your organization. And so we were focusing a lot on adopting these mindsets, and that is very hard and takes a long time. But I think it's very much at the core of what is needed to create maybe more flexibility and to create more speed also, which is necessary. But incredibly difficult. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And as to Alexa's point, Sarah mentions that this has so much to do with change management. As you said, that there is an absolute mindset shift that needs to happen within these organizations to even drive that kind of change. And then there has to be alignment in which direction we're going in. And then finally, change begins. Incredible. We are already 45 minutes in the conversation. I cannot believe this. So we're going to open up the Q&A section for our audience. So if you have any questions, please share it in the chat. Yeah, share it in the chat and we'll take them live. I'm sure we can actually carry this conversation for a whole day. But, okay. As folks are typing in, they've already shared some of their experiences. One of the questions to start us off, and this was something that we received on Instagram, was why does pilots thrive while institutional change disappears? Like a lot of the service design pilots, once you get to the pilot is thriving. But when you actually start implementing it, the change completely disappears. And maybe it's a continuation of what Alexis and Tim were already talking about, the mindset shift that is there. But do you want to elaborate on that with maybe a past example that you faced?
Yeah, I can go ahead. I think about, we were working on improving the retirement experience, and we had a pilot around having government be the convener to work to help frontline staff at community-based organizations work on address complex policy issues. So, for example, frontline staff that help older adults navigate public services were like, it's great we have a Medicare 101, but it gets complex when we're trying to navigate pension, Medicare, and Social Security at the same time. And so we created a program that would provide a convening of policy experts who can give advice and frontline staff. And it worked at first, but really I think what was the issue is like we asked the staff who run these programs typically to add another thing to their plate. And through the pilot, it was a short-term project. And so they could do it short-term, but we didn't take anything off their plate. And so I think sometimes with pilots, they can work in the short term, but then if we don't reprioritize or help teams drop something and not just add something, they're just not going to have the bandwidth.
Definitely.
And I sometimes feel that the sort of that the pilot is the objective of the whole thing. You know, let's go do a pilot, without thinking, you know, the prototyping way, because it's in language. So for every organization, different language work. But what I notice is that the word pilot has the feeling of people, well, if we've done the pilot, then we're done. Whilst if you maybe use other language that drive people more into experimentation, because a pilot is an experiment, and that experimentation leads to your next experiment, then you might have continuation of something after the pilot, and the pilot might not be, you know, successful in the sense that it improves whatever service, but you learn a lot from what doesn't work, so you can continue with the stuff that works. But the whole sort of iterative way of working is maybe, you know, it's also like a proof of concept. It's same sort of wording that sometimes prevents you from, you know, it's just one prototype. Let's go to the next prototype. Let's go to the next prototype.
True.
If I can add something to that,
Yes.
I also think one of the probable reasons for the success of pilots is we deliberately control the scope of pilots to very detailed points so that we can make it successful. But in reality, once we need to launch it, I don't know, to the whole public as the ongoing service, you cannot eliminate groups of people from it. You cannot remove the layers of complexity. And I think that's probably one of the reasons we lose a connection, or we don't see the success level when we see for the pilots, because we build them for success, but we need to think about those complex layer that comes with offering a service once it's launched for everyone.
I also think that there's some pilots that are high risk in terms of them being sustainable, and some that are really a test of something that is definitely going to happen. And you can almost draw the line in that if the pilot is saving time, saving money, saving energy, saving administrative burden, it's, you know, you're going to make changes to the thing before it gets rolled out, but you can be fairly certain that it's going to get rolled out. I think a lot of times we have pilots where it's adding cost, adding new tasks to staff. It may have a societal benefit. It may have kind of knock-on impacts that are beneficial for society, but it will also require funding and political interest and staff interest. And so I think when we get the pilot together, we should actually be already thinking, when we know it's going to be an intensive, a high need kind of rollout, we probably need to actually, before we even start that pilot, is think about, well, do we have shared needs around this? And if so, how are we going to support and fund it? Because I think that's one of the issues, is that a lot of these pilots have really great outcomes, but they're so resource intensive that they're not really designed for, or we don't have the right people in the room to make the decisions to make sure that they exist in the long term.
Absolutely.
For me, it's interesting because I was trying to understand what the word pilot meant, because I think people use it differently. Just like John, you were talking about different kinds of pilots. I think when I use the word pilot, I've already got institutional support, right? It's more of figuring out how do we get this product or service or whatever it is to everyone. Let's start with a small group. Let's learn and then build it out. So I'm thinking more of, I think I would call it a prototype, whatever this person might be thinking of as a pilot. And one of the things that we do, a little related to what you were saying, Tim, is that when we build experiments and we have hypotheses, but we also say, if this result happens, this is what we will do. This other result happens. We have all that decided ahead of time, so that by the time you get the results, we already know, like, oh, okay. And maybe it doesn't mean that it will move forward. Maybe it means we have to do more investigation to find out why those results were like this. But we kind of decide ahead of time. So it's not trying to then beg and plead and request more funding or more help. We've already decided ahead of time what we're going to do based on the results.
Hey, thank you so much, Victor. With that, we have one last question, but before we go into that, as you all are SDGC partners, I think one very important question for us today to cover is, why did your organization decide to partner with SDGC, and what does it mean to be a community partner? And I know a lot of these conversations that we're already having today is going to just blow up and scale at the conference, where you're going to meet more people and have this all throughout 3 days. So I'd love to know about your thoughts on that. Fuad, can I ask you to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really important is that having a strong community of designers with a bit of a global lens, or a concentric circle of regional, national, and global lenses, I think is really important, because I do think there's a lot to learn. And so a community like SDN can actually help us kind of stay connected with threads across these different circles and these different spaces. And I think there isn't that many people in this globally, right? And so I think it's really important that that those who are thinking this way have a forum to learn from each other. Through various groups, like Victor's and Alexis's group, I think is really important. It's critical for folks to get connected together, because we are experiencing different challenges at different times in the life cycle or in the systems that we operate in. So to me, it's another kind of like stabilizer, or another forum or place for people who are doing similar work to come together.
Yeah, maybe. For us, as we are a sort of network organization with people all over the the world, the global idea of the whole conference and network is adding a lot of value for us, as we know how interesting it is to hear stories from different parts of the world and have the views of different people from different cultures. So that's what we like a lot about this network.
Thank you, Tim. John.
I mean, I think that Service Design Network has actually been such a pivotal, played a pivotal role over the decade plus that it's existed, and at least I've been aware of it. And I think that the practice of service designers often are in silos. To hear that there's 100 plus in Canadian government is I feel like that's the dream, and surely that has happened in the UK and a few other places. But I think Service Design Network helps bring together a population that is otherwise quite dispersed, and as an organization, we're always promoting this kind of work with government partners and trying to promote as much as possible. So to have to have this organization and it just makes sense for us to be a support of whatever SDN is doing.
Amazing. Thank you so much, John. I know all of us have to drop off. We're at the top of the hour, so I'm actually going to push us into the last segment, which is our closing question. Since our theme of the day is operating system, what would you keep, delete, or install in the new public sector operating system? And John, I'm going to ask you to go first because I know you want to head out, and then I'll last.
What would I want to keep? This is a very no. I feel like one thing that I really much value in the Irish government is that when there are big important decisions to be made, they come together. The government partners come together on those decisions and have a unified perspective on that. For most famously, I guess it's the corporation tax. All political parties have kind of agreed to that. Again, for COVID, they came together and made the thing not political at all. And so I do value that slowness, the slowness of government, and the fact that there are these checks and balances to make sure that things are kind of are not shifting too fast. I know in the States there's questions getting rid of the filibuster, which will probably mean that every 4 years the entire government policies and services change back and forth, and that will not be good for those who run the services, nor will it be good for those who rely on these services. So I think that just we definitely want to get to a place where this is running smoother, but I think that also involves ensuring that the population at large really appreciates and values the work, more so than having some sort of mechanism to get it to happen quickly, because it can also happen unquickly then.
The slowness is for a reason and for the system to actually work with you. So true. Thank you so much for highlighting that, John.
Yeah, thank you for this chat.
Yeah, the things I keep, delete, and install, I would definitely keep transparency. I'm a strong believer in the transparency, and I think people should know what's happening, and the system shouldn't be a black box. I'm not talking about all the details of technicality, but just knowing what's happening to them, to their data and their decisions. I would delete designing first and teaching people to use it next. And something that I wish to see in probably every public sector is the end-to-end ownership for services. Who is accountable for the whole service across all the departments that it touches? That would be my wish for public sector.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Elnas.
Maybe what for me, the sort of mindset thing of people is always very important, and in the many projects I've seen is that sort of often has a very big impact in making or breaking sort of how you want to work together. So spreading that mindset beyond maybe typical service design roles would be an important one, and would need more attention, I would say. And I think I go also with Elnas about transparency and openness. Of course, the trust that you build as a public service, that's key. So yeah, definitely keep that.
Amazing. Thank you, Tim. Alexis and then Victor.
Yeah, I can keep this short. I would keep that mission-driven mindset and that passion that I think public servants have and public servant designers have. I think right now it's really hard to be in the federal government. And I just want to say, like, I see you all working really hard right now. It's always hard, but right now it is more hard. And so I would just say, like, I want to keep that passion that we want to make positive change.
Thank you, Alexis. Victor.
I don't know if the question is what we would keep or what we change, but I think I want to focus
delete and stop and focus on where you want to go.
Yeah, I've been to a lot of conferences this year that have a focus on shifting regimes, on authoritarianism, on designing democracy, and I think for me, I'd like to have us move beyond designing democracy to what I might call designing a biocracy, where some of our governments work a little bit more like the human body, as opposed to people deliberating and voting, and this time I won because we got the majority and you lost with the minority. But moving beyond that type of model to a biocratic one. And then the big thing, I don't know if it's keeping or changing, because I don't it depends on the status of it across the world, but just relationships. Can we design for relationality? I think when the relationships are better between people and their government, there's more trust, there's more willingness to work together, and that's been a huge obstacle for us where I live.
Right. Thank you so much, Victor, for sharing that. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I know it's a little bit abrupt, but I hope to continue these conversations in the conference as we all meet in person. So looking forward to that. Once again, thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we'll keep in touch. And you're all welcome to check out the LinkedIn chat. I know there are a lot of unanswered questions. Feel free to share your answers there. So thank you, audience. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And now, just to wrap it up completely, we have a few promos for you. As you know, that we are going to be hosting the SDGC Sandbox in September. This is specifically to this episode, what do we think tomorrow's society should look like? It's a global co-creation experiment. So I'd love for you to join us in this experiment as a participant. It's going to be for an entire week. So we start on Saturday, end on Saturday, and we all will come up with a lot of brilliant solutions with mentors that we can then share with the world of our social media. So do register and join us in the Sandbox event. Then we have a couple of special tickets for public sector professionals, which have limited seats. So feel free to scan this QR code and check out our SDGC website for that. And finally, on 15th is the last day for SDN Awards submissions. So submit your incredible project. There's a special public sector section as well. So submit your incredible projects and bring them to before the SDGC conference. So thank you, everyone, for staying, and thank you, our incredible audience, for participating so well. And we will see you next week on Thursday on Community Voices with another set of incredible guests. So thank you. Have a great day. Bye.